New poll indicates LGBTQ plus Latinos overwhelmingly reject Latinx. What's going on? The term Latinx has been used by politicians and pundits to show the disconnect between people who promote its use and the people it is supposed to describe. A recent Gallup poll surveyed Americans of Latin descent on what their preferred label was. 23% of respondents preferred Hispanic, 15% preferred Latino, and only 4% preferred Latinx. 57% of the people surveyed indicated they had no preference. Of those with no preference, a follow-up question asking what label they would choose if it was required indicated only 5% of those, or 3% of the total number of people surveyed, would have chosen Latinx. That indicates that at most 7% of all individuals surveyed would choose Latinx. Queer News Tonight would like to recognize the correlation between that number and the estimated 5% of Americans who identify as transgender or non-binary.
I wonder, in terms of the way that this term plays out politically, because in the same poll, 30% of respondents said they were less likely to support a politician who uses it. How does that translate into our political sphere, especially since Democrats in states like Florida, Texas, California, New York want to hold on to this community as a voting bloc?
I mean, I think particularly Democrats, right, should always attempt to be as inclusive as possible, right? I don't think that the answer is always to pay attention to the majority. You know, at times, the North Star is to pay attention to the most marginalized communities. I asked the same exact question that you're asking me right now to organizers from Arizona, from Florida, and from Texas. And the question was terms like defund the police or abolish ICE or Latinx. You know, these are terms that may seem too radical for some Latinos. So what do you do in those moments? I asked them. And the response to me was always run towards the North Star.
Coming from the comedy world, being a stand-up comedian, I've used that term because I thought people would prefer it. And here in South Florida, Latinos do not like hearing Latinx if they're not queer or, you know, I don't mind the term. I see why it's important because Latino, Latina does imply a gender, and it's the patriarchy that everything is gender
conformative,
it's male, right? And, you know, most tense in Spanish is male, you know. So it is patriarchal, so I get it. I see that the Latino community saying no to Latinx is them saying no also to pronouns and change and sexuality other than heterosexuality.
I noticed that a lot of this is very much a generational thing. Yeah. Because because in my school, I like whoever I asked, they're like where are you from? And they're like I'm Hispanic. So that's what I hear for the most part. And I do hear the occasional like Latinx or anything like that, but like it's not as common among my generation, and we don't really care for it. It's like whatever you want to use to identify yourself, use it.
Yeah.
So it's just whatever you're most.
We do know that about your generation.
Yeah, no,
and we love that.
It's very just like do as you will, you know.
Yeah.
I read that same peer review article. The Pew Research poll on this, and I found it interesting. And in some ways, if you use the term Hispanic, it sort of defeats the controversy, doesn't it? Because isn't Hispanic everything?
They do have Latin.
Because it's not a Hispanica or Hispanico, it's Hispanic.
Well,
Hispanic and Latino, they have different meanings.
They do.
Right,
Hispanic is just if you speak Spanish. So if you're from Spain or the Spanish-speaking countries.
Right.
Does not include Brazilians, for example. But Latino does include Brazilians, excludes.
Census
Spanish.
uses both. The census, the U.S. Census uses Hispanic/Latino.
And doesn't Spanish-speaking countries also use Latinx? That's how it was. That's how it started.
I've never
like
heard
the
that.
Latinx name.
I've heard last time we had one of these panels, we also heard just Latin. Like with an E at the end?
Yeah.
Gender neutral, not Latinx.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I had also a friend who's Latin. He's Chicano. And, well, that's another Latin. But, so he's Chicano, and he says, also trans, and he says that, what's the big deal Like, why do we even need, what do we even need Latinx? Like, what is,
Right.
was there a need for another way to describe the Latin non-binary?
Okay. I
Yeah.
don't know. I've heard like.
But he goes by they, them, he. So
Right. No, I'm binary trans, so I just say Hispanic or Latino.
mm.
But like, I've non-binary friends that do prefer like Latinx.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do know.
Yeah.
I go back and forth from Guatemala, Mexico, and here because of business. I've never heard that term outside of
America.
Americans who are Latinos.
Yeah, I think
And
it's like
a lot of them are not even, it's just Americans referring to Latinos.
it's like
Within that-
Americans branding another,
I
part
get
of
that
our
point that
community,
it's like-
right?
It's people
yeah.
outside the community that use it more than we do. So
Yeah,
it is
I
a
had
weird
a conversation
term.
with a friend and it was like, yeah, no, so like Latinos and like they're like, wait, don't you mean like Latinx? I'm like, why are you so quick to correct me when it's not even your culture, man? Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can't keep up. There's too many terms.
felt
I can't. Like, I'm exhausted.
So short poll. What would you? How do you identify?
Hispanic.
Latino.
Yeah, Latino.
Hispanic, Latino.
Mhm,
I'll go
Hispanic,
for but I
Latino.
usually say Hispanic or Latino. When I ask people, I ask them, "Are you Hispanic?"
I
if
say
wanna
Hispanic
know.
more often
Yeah.
than Latino.
I find in business and in comedy, that's the best term. Anyway.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Lara are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.